Why does your mind still whisper their name when they forgot yours so easily? Why does your chest still tighten when they've already moved on, like you were never real? This isn't love. This is your soul, visiting the grave of the version of you that begged for crumbs and called it connection. You don't miss them. You miss the version of you that believed in them. You keep revisiting the memories, scrolling through old photos, feeling an ache that doesn't make sense. Because logically, you know they weren't good for you. You know how they made you feel unseen, unheard, uncertain. So why? Why does your mind still circle back? Why do you still feel something pulling you toward a person who never gave you a place to land? This is where the confusion begins. You think you're missing them, but Zen teaches us most suffering comes not from what happened, but from what we believed about what happened. You're not missing their presence. You're missing your own innocence. There was a version of you that existed in that connection, a version that still believed people would love gently, that still thought softness would be returned with safety, that still imagined love as something sacred, something shared. And that version of you was hopeful, open, trusting. They smiled easily. They forgave quickly. They didn't look for red flags, they looked for light, even in people made entirely of shadows. But slowly, that version of you started to dim, not all at once, but like a flame running out of air. Each ignored message, each broken promise, each time you had to convince yourself that being treated like an afterthought was still love, a piece of you quietly faded. In Zen, we don't just grieve people, we grieve selves. We grieve the parts of us that died while loving people who were not ready. We grieve the unspoken expectations, the imagined futures, the warmth we gave so freely to people who only knew how to take. This is why the memory still hurts. This is why the ache still echoes. Not because you want them back, but because you never got to say goodbye to the version of you that believed in them. The version that still had faith, that love could heal people, that if you just held on tighter, they would stop running. You didn't just lose a person, you lost a part of you, the part that trusted too deeply, the part that stayed up late hoping, the part that waited for a text that never came, but kept praying it would. And now, your soul goes back to visit the grave of that version, not to bring them back, but to understand why you had to lose them to become this version of you. Zen wisdom teaches us, when the heart grieves over what it has lost, the spirit rejoices for what it has found. You are not broken for still feeling this. You are just standing at the edge of release. Your tears are not proof that you're weak. They are proof that you once loved with sincerity, and that love wasn't wasted. It carved depth into your soul. It taught you what not to settle for again. But don't confuse grief with longing. You don't want them back. You want your innocence back. The you that believed, that hoped, that trusted too soon and too much. But even that innocence had its role. It showed you how deeply you could love. And now it's time to love yourself in the same way. To grieve not with anger, but with reverence. To thank that old version of you for being brave enough to love recklessly and wise enough now to never repeat that lesson again. Buddha said, in the end, only 3 things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. You loved deeply. You lived gently. Now, let go not because they deserve peace, but because you do. You're not missing a person. You're just standing in the sacred silence, where an old version of you is finally being laid to rest. Bow to it, honor it, then walk forward. Because who you are becoming will one day look back at this moment and whisper, "Thank you for finally letting me be free." The body still waits for a goodbye it never got. Sometimes you feel it out of nowhere, a sudden heaviness in your chest, an ache in your bones, a strange tightness in your throat, as if you're about to cry but you don't know why. You think it's your mind missing them, but in truth, it's your body, still holding the last moment they left, without closure, without apology, without goodbye. Zen teaches us that the mind forgets quickly, but the body forgets slowly. Where the heart moves on with logic, the body stays behind in silence, waiting for something that never came. That last night, the silence on the other end of the phone, the way they disappeared without explanation. Your mind tried to rationalize it, but your body froze in that moment, and it never truly unfroze. Every muscle remembered, every nerve memorized, every heartbeat became a question, and that question still echoes beneath your skin. Why wasn't I worth a proper goodbye? In Buddhism, there is a truth we often overlook. What the mind releases, the body still rehearses. And so, without realizing it, you keep rehearsing the final scene over and over, in your sleep, in your dreams, in the way you flinch when someone suddenly pulls away, in the way you brace for abandonment even when love finally comes. You've called it missing them, but what you're really experiencing is energetic residue. Their presence may be gone, but the emotional imprint they left in your nervous system still lingers. The body doesn't measure time like the mind does. It remembers in sensations, not calendars. It knows how you felt, not when it happened. So even after years, your stomach may still tighten when a song plays. Your hands may still tremble when someone raises their voice. Your breath may still stop when you hear a name. And that is not weakness. That is a wound still open, not because you chose to leave it open, but because it was never properly closed. In Zen, we sit with that wound. We don't rush it. We don't label it. We observe it. We breathe into it. Because the body doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need answers. It only needs release. And release begins with acknowledgement. You don't need them to come back. You don't need them to apologize. You just need to stop carrying what they left behind. Let your body weep in peace. Let your chest shake. Let your hands unclench. Not because you're falling apart, but because you're finally giving the pain a voice. Buddha taught, the root of suffering is attachment. And sometimes that attachment isn't to the person, it's to the moment they left. The unfinished breath, the unspoken sentence, the final embrace that never came. But now you see it. You feel it. You know what it is. And that knowing is the beginning of healing. The body is not your enemy. It is the last loyal soldier still standing at the gate, still waiting for a goodbye that was never spoken. So go there, not to relive the pain, but to give it what it always needed, a sacred, silent, and complete farewell. Place your hand on your heart and whisper the goodbye they never gave you. Not for them, for you, because the wound they left behind was never yours to carry forever. Release it now, with breath, with stillness, with love. And when your body finally exhales that goodbye, you will feel something sacred, the return of peace to the place where pain once lived. Not every deep connection is divine, some are just familiar pain. There are some people you meet, and it feels like lightning. Suddenly, everything in you lights up. You feel pulled, drawn, connected, beyond words. As if your soul knew them from another lifetime. As if something in the universe aligned, and so you tell yourself, this must be divine. This must be a sign. This can't be coincidence. But not every deep feeling comes from a sacred place. In Zen, we are taught, the fire that feels familiar is not always holy. Sometimes, it's just old pain, wearing a new face. You don't always fall in love with a person. Sometimes, you fall into recognition, not of the soul, but of the wound. There are people who trigger something ancient inside you, not because they were sent by the divine, but because they match the vibration of a trauma you never fully healed. It feels intense. It feels real. But intensity is not intimacy, and chaos is not chemistry. You feel pulled toward them because your nervous system recognizes the pattern, because their silence feels like your father's, because their inconsistency feels like your first heartbreak, because their coldness reminds you of the love you tried to earn as a child. So you confuse familiarity with fate. In Buddhism, we call this the illusion of karmic gravity. You meet someone, and your pain leans in, not your peace. Your wound recognizes theirs, and suddenly you're dancing in a fire and calling it love. But Zen gently reminds us, just because something feels deep doesn't mean it's true. Some connections are karmic tests, not spiritual unions. Some people come into your life not to heal you, but to reveal the places inside you that are still broken. And when they leave, you don't just feel heartbreak, you feel disoriented, like you've lost a part of yourself. Because that person didn't fill you, they exposed you. They didn't add to your wholeness, they mirrored your emptiness. This is why it hurts so deeply, because it wasn't about them. It was about what they awakened in you. A memory, a wound, a belief that you're only worthy of love that burns and confuses. But Zen teaches us to sit with that pain, not to romanticize it, not to chase it, to observe it, to ask, why did this feel like love when it felt so unsafe? Why did I call their absence mystery instead of immaturity? Why did I keep returning to the fire, even when it burned me every time? You must understand, the universe is not cruel, but it is repetitive until you learn the lesson. Sometimes the soul brings you back to the same shape of suffering, so you can finally choose peace over pattern. Buddha said, "A man is not called wise because he talks and talks again, but if he is peaceful, loving, and fearless, then he is in truth called wise." So, ask yourself, did that connection bring peace? Did it open your heart with gentleness? Or did it confuse your mind while exciting your pain? Not every deep connection is meant to stay. Not every intense feeling is sacred. Some things feel spiritual because your wound has been waiting for a stage. But now you're aware. Now you see, you weren't drawn to them because they were your destiny. You were drawn to them because they matched your damage. And just like that, you can choose differently. You can sit still, breathe, and let the fire pass without walking into it again. Because this time, you don't need more proof of your pain. You need peace and true connection. The kind Zen honors, does not confuse. It does not vanish. It does not punish. It feels like still water, like breath, like home. They triggered your need to be chosen, not your capacity to be loved. It wasn't love. It felt like love. But deep down, it was something much older, something raw, something unspoken, something that began long before you ever met them. They didn't awaken your capacity to be loved. They awakened your need to be chosen. And that's a very different thing, because being loved is soft. Being loved is safe. But needing to be chosen, that's frantic. That's desperate. That's the ache of a child still wondering why no one ever stayed. You weren't falling for them. You were falling into a loop, into a space where you thought, maybe this time someone will pick me. Maybe this time I'll finally be enough. Zen teaches us, until we heal the root, we water the same sorrow with different names. And that's what happened. They came into your life with their mystery, their silence, their inconsistencies, and something in you recognized it, not as love, but as the pattern, the one you've been trying to complete since you were too young to understand what love actually meant. So you poured yourself into it, not because they made you feel whole, but because they made you feel hungry. And hunger has a way of blinding us to red flags, of confusing absence with depth, of believing that if we just try harder, they'll finally stay. But they didn't. They pulled away. They stayed distant. They gave you crumbs and called it affection. And you called it love, because it felt familiar, because it activated the part of you that still believed you needed to earn connection. In Buddhism, we talk about the illusion of self-worth through others, the belief that if I am loved, I am valuable. If I am rejected, I am not. But Zen reminds us, you are not broken because someone didn't choose you. They simply couldn't see what you held, and that is not your failure. Still, the wound was opened. They didn't give you safety. They gave you silence. They didn't give you presence. They gave you tests. And that younger version of you, the one who still holds the scar of not being enough for someone before he or she rose up and tried again, tried to be softer, more patient, less emotional, more perfect, more quiet, all to be picked. But Zen does not teach you to shrink. Zen teaches you to return to wholeness, to center, to breath. You were not meant to chase love like a shadow. You were meant to sit still and let love find you where you already are. Buddha said, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. So stop waiting for them to pick you. Stop waiting for that message. Stop waiting for closure from someone who only ever offered confusion. The truth is, they triggered your deepest ache. But that ache is your teacher, not your fate. Let it rise. Let it speak. Let it burn. And then, let it go. Because you don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You don't need someone to validate your softness. You don't need another mirror to reflect back your value. You are not someone waiting to be picked. You are the garden that no longer needs visitors to bloom. And the love you were trying to earn can finally be given by the one person who has been waiting all along. You. Your ego didn't want closure. It wanted to win. You say you wanted closure. You say you just needed them to explain, to tell you why they left, why they changed, why they stopped looking at you the same way. But if you sit in stillness, if you breathe deeply enough, you'll realize it wasn't really closure you were chasing. It was validation. It was victory. It was the part of you that whispered, if they just said, I mattered, if they just admitted they were wrong, then I can finally feel whole again. But Zen teaches, The ego doesn't want healing, it wants justice. It wants the apology it was never given. It wants the recognition it was always denied. So, when someone walks away without explanation, when they move on as if you were never sacred to them, the pain that rises isn't just heartbreak, it's ego death. Because it wasn't supposed to end like that. You weren't supposed to be forgotten like that. You thought your love deserved a better ending. And you're right, it did. But you were never writing both sides of the story. And they weren't reading the same book. So now the ego keeps spinning, rewriting conversations, imagining comebacks, creating scenarios where you finally get the last word, where you're seen, chosen, apologized to, admitted to be the one they should have never let go. This isn't weakness. This is the mind trying to reclaim dignity in a place where it was shattered. But Zen reminds us, what needs to win is still trapped. And what seeks closure through the actions of others is still not free. Buddha once said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And sometimes that poison doesn't come from rage, but from righteousness, from believing you deserve an ending that feels fair, that if they had any decency, they'd explain, that if they truly cared, they'd return with answers. But Zen teaches us to step out of the courtroom, to put down the evidence, to walk away from the invisible trial you keep hosting in your head, where you keep proving your worth, to someone who's not even listening anymore. You don't need to win. You don't need to be right. You don't need them to admit they were wrong. You just need to let go of the belief that you were unworthy because they couldn't see you. You just need to stop measuring your healing by the silence of someone who was never whole themselves. Their inability to give you closure is not a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of their capacity. You are not the unfinished business they left behind. You are the piece they'll never understand, because while they disappeared into their distractions, you sat in the silence and faced yourself. That is the real victory. Not revenge, not being proven right, but walking away without needing anything from the people who once made you feel like nothing. Zen whispers, you win by not needing to win. You heal when you no longer need their ending to feel complete. So take a deep breath. Bow to the story, not because it was fair, but because it taught you where your true power lives. In walking away, not needing applause, not needing closure, just needing yourself. And that is more powerful than anything they could have ever said. You were trying to heal the part of you that was unloved. Using them. It wasn't really about them. It never was. Not the way they smiled. Not the attention they gave you at first. Not even the way they pulled away. What pulled you in was what they awakened in you, a longing that had nothing to do with the present moment, and everything to do with the past version of you, the one that still aches quietly in the corners of your soul. You weren't looking for love. You were looking for repair. They became the stand-in, the symbol, the mirror. You saw in them a chance to finally rewrite what happened to you long ago. Maybe it was a parent who never protected you. Maybe it was someone who made you feel invisible. Maybe it was a silence that shaped your self-worth before you even knew how to speak your needs. And now, here they are. They say just enough to keep you hoping. They leave just enough to keep you chasing. They awaken just enough pain to feel familiar. And instead of running, you stay. Not because it feels safe, but because it feels known. Zen teaches us, until the inner child is heard, It will keep choosing people who speak in the voice of its first wound. You weren't staying for them. You were staying for the part of you that thought, if I can make them love me, then maybe I wasn't the problem all along. If I can finally feel chosen now, maybe I can stop hurting over the times I was forgotten before. But they can't give you that. Not because you're unworthy, but because that healing was never theirs to give. They weren't sent to fix you. They were sent to show you where you were still bleeding. In Buddhism, we don't chase healing through others. We observe. We listen to the ache. We sit with it like a student sits before a wise but painful truth. You kept trying to earn their love, to prove something to the voice inside you that once said, "You're not enough. You're too much. You're only lovable when you're useful." That voice wasn't theirs. It was born long before they arrived, but they echoed it so perfectly that you believed healing could happen through their approval. But Zen gently reminds us, healing doesn't happen through repetition. It happens through awareness, not by changing them, but by no longer needing them to complete the story. Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." So, pause. Breathe. Look inward. That longing you felt was the voice of your inner child asking, "Am I finally safe to stop trying so hard? Is it okay now to stop begging people to stay?" Yes, it is. The person who left wasn't your savior. They were your sign. The one that pointed to the place inside you that still needs your own embrace. And that's the most powerful shift of all. Because when you realize that you don't need them to stay, to prove that you are lovable, you return to your true self, to the version of you that loves gently, but no longer needs to bleed for love. So, next time your heart aches for them, ask yourself, am I missing the person? Or am I still chasing the feeling of finally being enough? Because one of those can never be filled from the outside, and the other is already waiting for you, inside your own arms. The memory isn't a sign to return. It's a signal that the lesson wasn't fully learned. You moved on. At least that's what you thought. You deleted the photos. You stopped reaching out. You even started laughing again. But some days, the memory comes back like a whisper, uninvited, unexpected, a name, a dream, a flash of something that once felt like everything. And it confuses you. You ask, why am I thinking about them again? Does this mean I'm supposed to go back? Is this the universe telling me I made a mistake? But Zen teaches, the mind doesn't revisit people because they're meant to return. It revisits them because something inside you hasn't yet returned to peace. Not every echo is a sign. Not every flash of memory is fate. Sometimes, it's just your soul circling back to make sure you understood the assignment. Because if you only walked away in action, but still carry them in energy, you haven't truly left. And the universe knows this. The body knows this. The lesson knows this. In Buddhism, we learn that what repeats is not a mistake. It is a mirror. And when a face keeps showing up in your silence, it is rarely about them. It is about the part of you that still hasn't fully understood why they were never meant to stay. You don't miss them. You miss who you were becoming when you were hoping they would change. You miss the part of you that still believed they were the one. But Zen reminds us, attachment survives in the gaps of unawareness. And when the soul is ready to evolve, it will bring back every unfinished story, not to reopen it, but to close it completely. That's what this memory is. A door you shut, but never locked. So your mind keeps peeking through, wondering if there's something left, some missing piece, some unread line in the final chapter. But healing means reading it again, this time with awareness. This time, not through the lens of longing, but through the eyes of truth. They didn't value you. They weren't ready. They triggered your pain more than your peace. And yet, you keep interpreting their memory as meaning. But meaning doesn't always mean go back. Sometimes it means go deeper. Go deeper into the lesson. Ask, what did I need them to teach me? What wound did they reflect? What part of myself did I give away just to feel enough? Because the memory won't fade until the meaning has been understood. Buddha once said, to understand everything is to forgive everything. Not forgive them, but forgive yourself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for losing yourself trying to keep someone who was never standing still. Forgive yourself for what you didn't know back then, and thank the memory for showing you what you now see clearly. This isn't a sign to return. It's a reminder to release, to let go with truth, not just time. And once the lesson is complete, the memory will no longer feel heavy. It will pass through you like wind through a window. No resistance, no ache. Just a moment, a breath, a final goodbye. This time from the inside. Your soul keeps revisiting the pain, not to relive it, but to rise from it. There's a reason the same ache keeps returning. A reason your chest tightens when you hear their name. A reason your soul flinches in silence. Even when the world around you says it's time to move on, you think you're broken for still feeling it. You think healing means forgetting. You think revisiting the pain means you're weak. But what if that's not true? What if the pain isn't here to trap you, but to transform you? In Zen, we are taught, the lotus does not grow in perfect waters. It rises from the mud because of it. So when your soul pulls you back to the memory, to the heartbreak, to the moment everything shifted, it is not because it wants to see you suffer. It's because there is still power hidden there. Still wisdom buried beneath what once broke you. Your soul is not trying to make you relive the story. It is asking you to rewrite your place in it. To look at the pain, this time, not with the eyes of the victim, but with the vision of the witness. To stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin asking, what truth is this trying to awaken within me? Zen teaches us that pain is not the enemy. Unconscious pain is. Pain that goes unexamined becomes the cycle. Pain that is met with stillness becomes the path. So sit with it. Don't numb it. Don't rush to replace it. Don't drown it in distractions. Let it breathe, because your soul is not broken. It's remembering. It's remembering every time you abandoned yourself trying to be enough for someone else. It's remembering every time you confused being needed with being loved. It's remembering every version of you that was silenced just to keep the peace. And now, it's bringing those moments back, not to haunt you, but to return you to yourself. You see, in Buddhism, we don't escape pain. We observe it. We bow to it. We let it teach us what joy never could. And one of the greatest lessons pain brings is this. You are not meant to stay in the place where your spirit was once buried. You are meant to rise from it softer, wiser, quieter, but more powerful than before. So if you find yourself revisiting what hurt you, don't run. Don't panic. Breathe. Listen. Ask yourself, what part of me is ready to grow now because of this? Because the pain didn't come back to drown you. It came back to remind you, you've survived. You've outgrown it. And now, It's time to let it elevate you. Buddha once said, "Just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past over and over again." And maybe this memory, this ache, this return of sorrow, is the sound of your soul shedding what it no longer needs to carry. You are not being pulled backward. You are being cleared for flight, prepared to rise. And when you finally stop fighting the return of pain and start learning from it, you'll find that your greatest freedom was hidden in the very thing you tried to forget. Because you don't rise in spite of the pain. You rise through it. That is the way of Zen. And that is how the soul awakens.